Hello folks, I am sitting here in front of the Grand Hotel with someone who knows a lot about markets, Liz Shorten from the CMPA BC branch. Welcome.
Hi Priya, nice to see you.
It's good to see you too.
The sun's great.
Isn't it? We're soaking it up.
We're very fortunate.
We are. Now, you used to do market readiness programs for producers, so you offer a very unique perspective. We've been talking to a lot of producers about their experiences at markets, first time versus having been here for many, many markets. But we haven't really talked about how do you know when you're ready to go to your first market? At what stage of your career do you need to be? Or just what are some tips that you would give to people out there who are like, should I go to Cannes next year?
Well, I think the ultimate thing is what is the goal? And the goal is to build your network. That's really what this business is about. Building your network in terms of, as a producer, other producers that you might want to work with. In Canada these days, very difficult to raise financing exclusively in Canada, so you've got to get out of the country, you've got to work with partners, both financial and from a creative perspective. So building your network, whether that's a co-producer, whether that's a buyer in television or feature film, you need to get out to markets and festivals to do that. And I always think that it's good, you've got to have a project, ideally with some kind of market interest at the development stage, or ideally, into some level of production commitment in order to really make the most out of your festival or your market experience.
Right. We've actually heard that from some of the more senior producers here, that it's not about selling your project necessarily, which I think a lot of people who haven't been to market and are really eager might think is the sole goal of being at Cannes, but it is about building those relationships so that later on you're ready to come to them with a project. What about the idea of big fish, little pond, little fish, big pond?
Well, sometimes I think we Canadians, especially because we live so close to the States, we are, we diminish what our opportunities are, and this is a global marketplace now, and whether it's Netflix, whether it's a traditional buyer, whether it's a traditional distributor, everybody's looking for great content. And I think the time has never been better for Canadian creators, in that you can meet with Netflix, you can meet with Amazon, you can meet with new entrants like BritBox that just opened in Canada as a new streamer. And they just did their first original commission, which is a television series, limited television series with Omni Film called Bletchley Circle San Francisco. So there's opportunities, and I can imagine when you come to a market for the first time, you're overwhelmed.
Yes.
But part of that is getting the lay of the land, and I've always said that to set some goals, and they can be modest, to meet 3 new people. Right? To whatever those goals are, or you meet 3 new people every night, and because that's about the most important thing around the building your network. People don't understand that you can meet with a financier or a buyer, and maybe that one project isn't the right thing for them, but maybe a project 2 years from now is the right thing, and you've had a great interaction with them. You talked about your kids, maybe you talked about your dog, maybe you talked about whatever. Like, we're all human beings, and if you can build authentic relationships with people and points of interest, maybe you talk about the movies you like. That's what's going to carry you in the business, and that's as I've watched it over the last 25 years, people who successfully build an international network are the producers who are still working today.
It makes sense. It's all really about connections, because it is a network. It takes a community to make a film. My last question for you. I'm a producer. I come to you. I say I've produced two short films, and I have another short film that I'm completing. Should I go to Cannes?
Well, I guess the question is, look at the different opportunities, before you. Do you go to Toronto? Do you go to Berlin? Do you go to Cannes? As just 3 examples of, key feature markets. Each of them is different, Toronto obviously potentially is less expensive because it's in our country, but it's not centralized. So that's a challenging place to break into. Berlin has a co-production market and is a hotbed for independent film. That might be, it's a little less expensive than Cannes. That might be something to consider. And you can apply to get into the co-production market, and that with a project. So that's a different thing than Cannes. I think at that stage, though, if you're doing shorts, you potentially, if you get a cheap apartment, to get a cheap flight, just to experience it, just to see what it's like, to walk into the Palais, to walk into the market, to see that your content, whatever it is, short form, long form, has to punch above its weight with all of these thousands of pieces of content that are out there. I always think that that's great for Canadian producers and creators to see, because it just has to be really great.
Yeah.
And then and if it is great, it's going to find an audience.
It has to measure up. So really it is worth coming here for the first time, like you say, to get the lay of the land, so you're not overwhelmed and completely, doe-eyed when you come here for the first time with projects that are ready to hit the market.
And if you have an opportunity, and I think whether it's myself or Creative BC, to hook up with a senior producer before you come and have a chat, and we often do that. I'll hook somebody up who hasn't been before with a senior producer who has been, just to ask those stupid questions like what to wear, all of those things. I think is a really great, smart idea as well. So you can do all the prep, and we're hoping at the CMPA to do some export readiness workshops in the coming years. So if we get our act together, that's something else to look to.
Well, thank you so much. These are very practical and useful tips. So hopefully you'll all now be able to make that decision of when am I ready to go across the pond. Thanks so much, Liz.
You're welcome. Pleasure.